Hi everyone and welcome to this year's Christmas Wreath Kit tutorial for 2023. I know there's slowly getting more and more of these added to YouTube, so this is the 2023 version. Very excited for this one. It's actually a really lovely like wintry kind of day, which is like the sun shining, it's like a bit glistening outside, which is kind of how I based this year's Christmas Wreath Kit. I wanted it to be like really crisp, really fresh, like those glistery, frosty mornings. So I've got lots of beautiful ingredients, which I'll quickly talk you through. So everything you see here is what you'll have in your kits. So we've got some lovely fresh Normandy blue spruce as our kind of main foliage. And then we've got three other types of foliage this year. So I've gone for this lovely Pittosporum, which I've always loved. It's kind of that grey green tone, and it's kind of got a two-tone colour to it. Some really nice conifer Arizonica, love this stuff, very voluminous, again that kind of bluey grey tone, and then some lovely eucalyptus baby blue, which just adds a lovely different texture. And then we've got some white limonium, which is really what's going to add that kind of frosty, wintry, but also a really nice delicacy to the wreath, with some silver brunaria, which I love. It's quite an unusual one, but I really, really love this. And then some pussy willow branches. You'll also have a little bag of moss. Mine is down by my side. You'll have a little bit of ribbon to finish it off with. So I'm actually going to put this over here just to keep it nice and clean. You'll have a little bit of twine to hang it with. Again, I'll put mine over there because I'm not going to need it until the end. You will have a 12-inch wire wreath base. You'll either have it like this, where it's like slightly raised, or you'll have a completely flat one. It makes no difference to your wreath. It's just as and when what we can get hold of throughout the years. And then you'll have a wire reel. The only thing that you need that I don't provide is the snips. So I'm using the Sentai Niwaki secateurs. They're my favourite for wreath making. They cut through everything very, very easily. So yeah, that's it. And I think I always say this with wreath kits, but just make it somewhere where you feel like physically comfortable. I like a kitchen island because it's nice and high. I find a table can feel a bit low, and I can feel a bit hunched, like you're going to be standing here for, you know, around an hour. So if you've got the space to do it somewhere higher up, I highly recommend it. And yeah, and otherwise, hopefully you've got some nice Christmas tunes on, a mulled wine, a Prosecco, whatever you're fancying, and maybe you're even doing this with some friends. So yeah, it's just going to be a really, really nice festive activity to do. I'm going to move the limonium, the brunaria and the pussy willow for now, because I'm actually going to mainly concentrate on creating like the base of the wreath with the foliage. So I'm just going to pop them over there whilst we work on this. And then the first thing we have to do is the messy part, which is mossing up our wreath base. And the only thing we need to do is just attach your wire to the wreath frame, and you can just go around it a few times, just give it a nice tug, make sure it's attached, and then you're just going to kind of zigzag around the whole base. And you want this to be, you know, relatively tight. You don't want it to be loose where it's gappy or sagging, and that kind of is that applies for the whole time you're making your wreath. Everything needs to be nice and tight. You don't want any bits and bobs falling off when you're opening and closing your door over Christmas. So just all the way around, like so. And we're not going to cut this wire off until we're fully finished with the foliage base. So I'm just going to leave that there. Now I am a right-handed person, so I find it much easier to work as I'm looking at my wreath on this side from the right side. If you're left-handed, you might find it more comfortable going in the opposite direction, as in starting that way and moving your wreath around. I'm right-handed, so I start this way and my wreath goes around that way. But that will make sense as I start to do this. Right, let me just get some of this lovely moss. And what we're going to do is just going to take kind of small bundles of it and just plonk it on the top of the wreath like that. If you've got the flat wire, then you'll be plonking it on like that, and you'll just be attaching it in this exactly the same way. And you're just going to zigzag over this in the same way that you've just zigzagged all the way around your wreath. I find it kind of easier to cover up what I'm doing so that I know it's not going to fall off whilst I'm wiring it on. And you want this to be relatively chunky. You really don't want it to be thin because we're going to get to the point where we're poking in some of our ingredients into this moss. So it's important that it's thick enough to poke things into, but not too thick, otherwise it's going to be really, really heavy. So you should have the perfect amount in your bag to create all the way around what you need. And if you've got loads left, it probably means that you've gone a bit too thin, and you can just go over the top of it, just go round again. There is something I really like about mossing up a wreath base. I'm not entirely sure why. And the moss should be damp, but if it arrives to you and it feels a bit dry, just, you know, squeeze out a cloth or something over it with some water, just so you can get a really good feel for it to be a bit more damp. You might find a few odd little bits and bobs in there, part of a plant. You often find some nice little pine cones as well. And obviously this is filmed real time, but if you take longer than I do to do this, just take as long as it needs, because I really do believe that making a wreath is just such a lovely activity that shouldn't be rushed. So just take as long as you need, rewind it if you need to, pause it. Back to the beginning, and just make sure you're happy with it all being completely covered, leaving our wire on, and I'm just going to clear away some of my mess. Luckily the bins are just here. I recommend using the box that we deliver your kits in. Use that as like your bin. Whilst you're doing it, just have it on the floor, and then you can just put it all in the outside bin when you're done. And I'm going to get covered in moss. I'm wearing a white jumper to make a wreath, but you know. Okay, so now that you've done this part, I'm going to leave my wire where I want to start attaching the foliage to my wreath. And I'm just going to cut open all of the foliage bunches, just so that I've got quite nice, easy access to them. It's already done. And this part is really like where you can just be creative. If you're somebody that wants and likes a bigger wreath, then cut your branches slightly bigger. Just be mindful that you still want to be able to have enough to go all the way around. This should make a wreath between about 70 to 75 centimetres from like end to end. If you've got a narrower door, I often get asked about this a lot, like, can I make the wreath smaller? I love it, but it won't fit. Just cut everything down smaller. So literally do that in half and make it much more compact. It will still be absolutely beautiful. It will just be more neater, compact. I like somewhere in the middle. Our door is actually quite wide. It's an older door. So yeah, I can get away with it being a little bit more gnarly, if you like. And I'm going to use kind of a bit of everything in this, I think. And with the conifer, you get really long branches, so you just want to cut it down and then just remove a couple of them lower pieces, just so that your wire's got somewhere to hold it on with. I'm going to start laying this foliage onto my wreath base, and I'm going to make sure that the stems are kind of in the middle of that moss base. You know, I don't want to put them over here, because that's going to be really exposed as we make the wreath up, and we certainly don't want them going in this angle. The whole idea is that they go pointing to the outside of your wreath, so that you create even more kind of shape. And just laying them on top is something that I find really, really helpful, just so you get a good idea of how it's looking and working. So I'd like a little piece of eucalyptus in there, and then maybe another little piece of my spruce over this side. Like so. And then you're just going to kind of hold that all down, find your wire, and you're going to wrap around the bottom part of the stems 2 or 3 times until you're quite happy that it feels nice and secure. Like so. And at this point, it's going to look quite strange. You're going to think, you know, how is this going to build up? But as long as you keep in the same direction the whole way around your wreath, and roughly the same size kind of little bunches, it's going to look amazing. You just have to kind of trust the process. So again, just laying on my foliage. And what I'll try and do is, can you see, like here, I've got this piece of pittosporum over that way. If I laid that one there and then put another bit of eucalyptus there, it's all going to look very, very symmetrical. So I always try and make each kind of bundle, the formation of the way that I'm laying the stems down, just a little bit different, just to give it, I guess, a little bit of interest, and just loads of texture. Something like that. And then maybe a little bit of eucalyptus on that inside bit. And you can see, so I've laid, if I just pick them up for you, what I've done is I've made sure that I'm covering everything that you can see, any exposed wire on, and I'm laying my stems on there just so that it covers it, and that you're creating like this kind of same sort of shape, I guess, is what you're after. If I did it kind of like that, you're going to have a very, very heavy wreath, and you're probably going to run out of foliage eventually. It's all going to get very, very thick. But equally, if you put it too far away, it's going to be really, really gappy, and you're not going to get that nice rounded shape. So just so that it covers it, just so that it makes that nice shape, but have a play with it before you attach it. So again, find your wire and wrap the bunch to your wreath base. And making a wreath is literally just that, just on repeat. So this is the part where it's just very, very therapeutic. Really take your time, enjoy it, and yeah, just kind of lose yourself in this kind of section of the wreath. I love this, a kind of really nice, thinner, long piece. So I want to make sure that I'm using that on the outer section so that it kind of is a bit feathery and light over there. When I first started wreath making, actually, I would cut up all of my foliage before I would make the wreath. And there's no right and wrong in making a wreath, by the way. Nowadays, I actually quite enjoy cutting and like working at the same time, just so that I can really see exactly what I need. But if you prefer to cut first, that's fine, because there is no right or wrong with floristry. I think that's why I've always really loved it. So that's our third bunch on. And you can see like I'm already creeping to the very edge of the island. So just give yourself as much room as possible so that you can still kind of see the shape that you're building. If you've got any stems that are just not cut, once they're attached, just trim them off. And you can see how I'm starting to turn the wreath as well. So obviously we started like this, working on this first bundle. And as I've been working on the next bundle, I've turned the wreath a little bit more, and then the next bundle, and then the next bundle. And I just find that that really helps me keep everything in the same angle, because you're always working like that. I'm always placing my stems at the same angle. I'm never changing that. We're just turning the wreath. And just make sure that these bunches that you're attaching are attached nice and secure. I always give the wire a little tug at that point, just to really know that that's not going to go anywhere, because we're going to tie the wire off at the end, and you don't want it to be loose. So again, I'm just going to trim that conifer stem. So that one's on, and then we're just going to turn it again. But before I put the next one on, I'm just going to hold it up for you, just so you can see kind of how it's building up so far, whilst we're kind of over that halfway point. And don't worry at this point if you're seeing a few little gaps or anything that you think, oh gosh, like, I could have put a bit more foliage in here, because when we finish it off and tie it off, the beauty of having this moss-based wreath is that you can actually poke some of your stems into that, so that you can mitigate any of those slight gaps or anything that you've got going on. And it's very easy to have those gaps because you're working kind of on top of it. You can't see it all that clearly. You can hold it up and stand in front of a mirror. At the end, you'll see me popping it down on the floor, and I'll have a look at it from like a bird's eye view. And that's something that I've just kind of always done, because it really helps you get like the whole view of your wreath. this long bit. Keep losing my snips. I had somebody message me the other day saying that she couldn't wait to make her wreath, and that she had last year's wreath up until March the following year, so March this year, and she just kept like taking little bits out that had maybe got past their best completely and gone over, and just kept it up. Just loved it. So there you have it. I'm always asked, how long do these last? So March is the longest that I've ever heard of it. We do keep ours up for quite a while though. I've got this really rather chunky piece of the Arizonica that I want to use in this bit. So I'm just going to put that in there, and then maybe lay in some eucalyptus on top for a bit of texture, a bit of pittosporum. So we're getting close to the end. Just going to trim that chunky stem off. Yeah, I reckon we've got 2 more bundles, so this will be the penultimate one to go on. Got a big old piece of Arizonica here as well that I want to use. I love these when you get these kind of, I think they're nuts on them. Okay, so for the very last bundle, I find it easier to not actually work on the wreath when I'm placing the foliage down. I actually find it easier to make a little bundle, trim all the stems, and then pop it in. It'll make more sense as I start to make it, I'm sure. So in exactly the same way, we're just going to make this little bundle like we've been doing, and maybe I'll lay it here so that you can kind of see it a little bit better. And it needs to kind of fill this last little gap here. And what we're going to do is just kind of like pull that first bunch away, and then you can tuck this bundle in and just have a little look and see if that's about the right size, which luckily it is. But I'm just going to pop a little bit more eucalyptus just down this side just to give it a bit of height there. So holding them all together, and I've made sure that this side is slightly lower and then this side is much higher because we're still following the shape of the wreath where you want this side to create all of the kind of volume and the bigger circle. So pulling that up, tucking them stems under it, and then this is where it gets a little bit trickier. So I'm going to hold that bundle down just out of the way so that I can wire on this final bundle. Like so. And because it's the last one, I tend to go around like 4 times, giving it a really nice pull, tug, make sure it's all really secure, like so. And then, hopefully, you have something a little bit like this. But I think the beauty of wreath making is that we all have the same ingredients, but they all look so unique and different to each and every one of us. The first thing I'm going to do is actually tie off this wire whilst I know that it's nice and tight. I don't really want to do anything else until I'm comfortable that that's all tied off. So just give yourself a little bit of length around about there. And we're going to use this a little bit like a sewing needle. And you're just going to find some of this copper wreath wire. And you're just going to kind of poke it through. Just give it a really nice tug. Until you're satisfied that it's not going to come undone. So I'm just going to trim that off about there, and then just going to poke that just into the moss so that it doesn't damage your door or anything like that. And it's gone, and everything's attached. So then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm actually going to pop this on the floor now. Ignore my Ugg slippers with my socks. It's a great look. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's rather circular. I'd probably like to put in something behind here. It just looks a bit smaller here, but otherwise very happy. So I'm actually going to leave it on the floor for a second, just whilst I poke in some small additional pieces. And when you're poking them in, you just want to make sure that you really, anything that you're poking in has a nice 45-degree angle so that it's a good point, basically. And you're just going to find the moss base and poke the foliage into it until it feels like it's kind of caught. So nice 45-degree angle on your foliage, and then just poke it in. And I've just got a few little bits of eucalyptus left that I'll poke in somewhere. And there you have it. So I'm just going to shimmy all of this onto the floor whilst we then bring in our next ingredients, and this is where it gets really nice and creative. I actually do really just love a foliage wreath though, so if you don't fancy covering it up, then you could leave it as it is, because it is very nice. So a little bit of space. Bring your wreath back on. And you can bring the rest of your ingredients in. So the first one we're going to use is going to be the limonium. And this is really lovely stuff to work with. It has a bad rep because it doesn't, some people find the smell quite offensive of this. I don't mind it, plus it's going outside, so it doesn't matter. And the eucalyptus and spruce make up for it tenfold. So you're just going to kind of cut pieces of this. You can see like the stems is a bit like gypsophilia, where you get like loads of different side shoots on it, and you just need to cut smaller pieces off it as you're going through, just to make them a bit more manageable. And make sure to give them a nice 45-degree angle cut. And we're going to find that moss base again and just start poking it in. And we're going to do this the whole way round, making sure, this is very important, that you're going in exactly the same direction as the foliage. So all of my foliage is going in this direction. You don't want to be poking it in the other direction. It's going to lose that circular feel. Just keep it at exactly the same angle. And make sure that you remember to like cover all of the wreath. So treat it as like the top, the inside and the outside, because you are actually going to see your wreath from all angles, and you want to make sure that it's all distributed very evenly. So smaller bits on the inside, just like we did with the foliage, longer pieces on the outside. And as well, if you've got any gaps that you're a bit worried about, this is a great one to use to kind of fill them in. Just finding that moss base and poking them in until they feel like they've caught. I'm not actually sure about that piece. I don't really love the uniformity of that shape. So I'm going to cut a couple of bits off just to make it less uniform. And use these smaller pieces on the inside. Making sure that we're still going in the same angle as all the foliage, and you'll see that I'm kind of turning the wreath in exactly the same way. Anything that you've got that's like a bit of a blunt end, just trim it right down so that you can't see it. Nobody would ever know that it was there. Cool, I'm going to have to open our back door. It's so warm in here. I was absolutely chucking it down with rain this morning, and then it's nice and sunny. Still making sure that I'm turning the wreath so that I can work on it in the same way that we did with our foliage. Just makes it so much easier. Almost back to the beginning. Okay, so I'm back to the beginning. I still have quite a bit left, but I don't want to overdo it with the wreath, with the statice, because I still want the foliage to kind of shine through. So I'm just going to lay it down on the floor again, just to make sure that I'm happy with the positioning of the limonium, which I think I am. It all looks fine. It all looks nice and kind of randomly distributed, but delicate. There's nowhere that it's kind of looking too solid, which is what I'm always conscious of. So we can bring that back up, and any of this that you have left over, pop it in a vase. Nice little bud vases, make some really cute little tablescape with it. And then next up we're going to put in our silver brunaria. So this has quite a unique foliage on it that I just really love the colour and the texture of this. So you get 5 stems with these, and you can either just put them in as a whole stem and kind of cut them, but I'm just going to cut off a couple of these, anything with like a little side shoot on, just so that I can get even more out of them really. Like with this one, for example. I'll cut it there, and then I can also use this bit. And this one's got a few on. Probably cut that about there, and then also use that. So, just as we're doing, nice sharp angle on these. Hold them near the bottom. They're nice and chunky. And find that moss point, and we're just going to nestle them right into the foliage and make sure they've really gone in. And again, just like we did with the statice, so some of them you want longer, some of them you want shorter to kind of nestle into the middle and the inside of your wreath. But we just want to make sure that it's kind of distributed very naturally. These kind of smaller pieces, just going to tuck in to the moss. It just gives a totally different texture to what we've been using. The more texture and different types of foliage, the better for me. I just think it makes such a nice wreath. Going to move this one actually. This is the beauty with popping them in and out of the moss. You can just take it out whenever you need to. Just felt like it was a bit too close at the bottom there. Nice. So happy with that placement. And then last thing to go in are our pussy willow branches. So you've got 5 of these, and they're quite long, so you can cut these down, and I recommend cutting them like just above a bud so that you get the most out of it. So that would form the top of my next stem. Like that, and then you wouldn't be able to see that I've like cut it like that. So nice sharp 45-degree angle. Might need to remove a couple of the little buds just so that you can really make sure that it's gone into your moss base. And then again, just find that moss carefully but kind of firmly, position them in. And again with these, exactly like we've done the limonium and the brunaria, you don't just want these all going around the outside, you do want some of them to be in the middle and any like much smaller bits on the inside. just make sure you've gone all the way around. Cut a couple of smaller bits. And there you go. Christmas wreath, pretty much done. We've just got ribbon and twine to hang it with. So I'm just going to hold this up for you guys to see. Now, I haven't decided on top and bottom, which doesn't really matter with this type of wreath because anywhere could be the top and the bottom. But let's maybe go for about there to be the top. So that's where we're at the moment. And that you won't be able to see, I don't know if you can see it from your angle, I've got a stem of the limonium coming through. I don't know if you can see that. So I'm just going to trim that off. There. And then like I said, the last thing to do is just kind of decide where the top and bottom would be for you. It might be that it's quite obvious. You might have like a definitive top and bottom. Sometimes I always find, particularly with my own wreaths, as I turn it, I'll just kind of see it. So you could always get somebody to hold it for you so that you're like, that's definitely the top. Because sometimes it can look slightly more oval if it's in a different position. And then at other points, you'll be like, that's it. It looks totally circular from that angle. So I'm just going to pop mine on the floor so I can get a good idea. Now, and just have a look at it from a few different angles. So I would say that is going to be my top right in there. So I'm just going to pick it up there and kind of mark that point with my thumb. And then take our twine and kind of, you want to just kind of make a bit of a gap between the moss and that wire, the copper, because that's where we're going to attach it to. So I'm just going to loop the wire through, the twine, sorry, like that, and then thread those two pieces back through. You can do this in a multitude of different ways, like that. And then I'm going to make kind of a knot a little bit higher up. I just kind of know where our nail is in the door, but there are so many different ways that you can hang your wreath. You might be putting it on, I don't know, a wreath hanger, a command hook. You might need it to go all the way through the other side, like to the inside of your house. And that's how my mum does it, so yeah. And you've got a nice knot. I'm going to double knot it because these are heavy wreaths, so you just want to make sure that you're not going to come down one morning and it's on the floor. That would be devastating, like that. And then I'm going to have to wash my hands to even think about touching our lovely white ribbon. And if you're like me and you've kind of got sap all over them, the best thing to do, because my hands look like this the entirety of winter, this time of year, is use olive oil and like a soap. So that is the easiest way to get that horrible sap off. Because it does, if I touch that ribbon, it will stain it and it won't look very nice. So good old olive oil. And I think I've randomly just saw the fairy liquid in there, which it not normally is. So a good glug of both. Warm water. Not the most riveting of things to watch me wash my hands, but there you have it. little tip for you if you need to get that sap off. And so with the ribbon, you can obviously make a bow. You could hang it using, instead of the twine, you could actually hang it. I quite like it just halved, but not perfectly halved. I like one of them slightly higher than the other, and kind of pinching it at the top, and then having it directly in line with where the twine is, where it's being hung, kind of at the back. So you need to just find, you can try and thread it if you wanted to, but I try and kind of poke it in, and it does stay, but we have got a sheltered porch, so if you don't, let's thread it. I don't know if you can see that piece of wire there, but I'm just going to try and thread it behind that wire. We can neaten up any of the frayed edge. And then you know it's absolutely not going anywhere. And just get it to a point where you're happy with the length. And I quite like it kind of tucked under, like I've done. Just going to trim that slight fray there that I've made. These aren't the best scissors at all, but it's fine. We got rid of the fray. And then I just kind of let them kind of fall in and around the foliage, like so. And there you have it. That is our Christmas wreath. So hopefully you have something that you are incredibly proud of, because I think for me that's one of the most important things about making a wreath. I remember going on my first ever wreath making class, and yeah, that's what started all of this for me, and I honestly left feeling so invigorated by creating something like this that I then went on and created more and more and ended up where I am now. So I hope you feel very, very proud of yourselves. You've really enjoyed it, and yeah, just wishing you all the most happiest of Christmases with your wreath on your door. I hope you're feeling very festive, and thank you so much for joining us in this year's Christmas wreath kit making, and I'll see you guys again very soon.